Hi everyone, whoever's tuned in, I actually never know, but this is the week 5 of the quarantine, and painting on Friday with me. So I said I was going to do a figure environment, and truthfully I did not make a decision until the last 5 minutes. I decided on a specific image and I was unsure about it, so last night I came in the studio and did a little, 12 by 12 study to see if I could even pull this one off, because I'll explain in a second. This is a little 12 by 12 study that I did last night of what I'm going to try and do. This photograph happens to be probably 30 to 35 years old, and it was a photo that I shot during a Silomar workshop of one of the models that we took out on the coast, and all I had was a little tiny print like this, and so I took it and had a large blow up made from, I didn't have the negative, I just had the print, from the print, so it's kind of out of focus and it's not real clear. So this is kind of a figure and environment from an unclear photo. Let's kind of title, it's a long title, but that's basically what it is. I got my quick sketch in, basic placement, compositionally. The environment is pretty much all foliage. I will eventually do another type of figure and environment and do something with a little bit more landscape oriented. So this is going to kind of talk a little bit about doing this, and this is just with brushwork. And that's basically how I'm going to start. I'm going to start indicating I need the values back here before I know how to do this. That's what I did there, and that's what I'm going to do here. So we'll go ahead and take the biggest brush I've got, which is, actually I have one larger, but this is 1.5 inches, a gesso brush. And I'm going to start with some turp because I want the paint to be quite thin so I can move it around a lot, maybe a little bit of medium in it, a little of the safflower oil, and we'll start with kind of an umber and a sap green and see what that ends up. A little more sap green, the warm is taking over. A little more umber until I get the balance that I want. That's a little bit too sappy. So a little more umber. And we're just going to scumble. I need a tone back there. It's not dark enough, I can tell you right now. So I threw a little ultramarine blue into it. A little more sap green. It's because I have too much turp, so you can see the difference. So I'm going to push this into this, which has already got turp in it, and I'm going to hopefully be able to use some of the brush work, the brushiness of this to finalize the piece. So I'll have a lot of that as an underpainting, hopefully. This is the fun part. Those of you that like ultra loose, thin to thick painting, this is the thin, loose part. Then we have to get a little bit more serious, a little bit about accuracy. So we're kind of coming up. There's a sky up there. I'm not going to worry about it right now. That I'm going to put in pretty much towards the end, and it's going to be almost that value. So thankfully, what I toned my board with, this happens to be actually a piece of hardboard, or it's a 1/4 inch piece of hardboard that I'm working on today. Sometimes I work on canvas, sometimes I work on hardboard type panel, and I've been asked how do I decide, and it's what I feel like at the moment. It's a feeling. I like different stuff. I never like repeating myself, so when it comes to working on pieces, so I really enjoy exploring to a degree, and I've worked on this enough prior that this really isn't what I would call an exploration. I've done it before, so we're just kind of using, and I'm kind of indicating there's a darker mass and then a little bit of a lighter golden mass. So we're hitting the darker mass first, and I will not take too much time on this.
I'm going to move the camera just to see the reference over there rather than the...
Sure. And I'll try to stay out of your way as much as I can. I noticed when I actually went back and looked at what I did, it just seemed like I was blocking you guys' view a lot. So
I think this is better actually, so.
that's fine. Then I'll stay to the side. And so we kind of have approximation of leaving the silhouette of this figure in here. As long as I've got this tone, this is very dark tone, on my brush, I'm going to actually put it down here where it's very dark. Just because I'm going to lighten it up in a second anyway. So we're just going to kind of put this big area in. This is just basically just a kind of almost a dry scumble with just a little bit of medium. And you can see that I'm going to vary the tone a little bit. I throw a little cad red light, a little, just, it's getting boring. That's one thing I don't want, boring. So, you always try colors. You know what I mean? It's like the way that I paint generally is I use my experience, my knowledge, but I also guess, for lack of a better word. I really guess. And I like to think of it as an educated guess. Let's put it that way. But I guess primarily so that I can see right here, there's a area 2, so let's get that kind of in there real quick. And just basically rubbing it on, and some of the underneath tone is actually coming through. There's a little bit up in here I can do. I'm just using the remnants of the tones that I have on the brush. Now I'll lay those areas in there a little bit more of I'm going to lay out the umber, bring in a little bit more ochre, and a little more sap green, and maybe a little bit more ochre. And we'll kind of push that in this area. I'm going to add a little medium, a little, just so I can move it around pretty good. I really just don't have enough paint on the brush. And when you saw me do this right in here, that told me I did not have enough paint on the brush. I had to get some more pigment there. Now, there we go. I'll create some of the effects right now if I can, so I don't have to go back later. This is a and even if I were doing a long painting, I would go back into it, but I wouldn't necessarily over-define it. I would use a lot of my initial lay-in as part of the finish. You can see I grabbed a little cad red light on the edge of my brush. We'll kind of scrub it down in here and a little bit up in here. Yeah, about there. I'm looking at proportions because I have kind of a sketch down, but my sketch is not all that accurate. And I'm aware of that. So I'm not relying on the sketch to tell me everything. It's a good starting point, which is about what you're doing when you paint. You adjust a lot, or I should say I adjust a lot. I'm pretty convinced that some of what I do in my first stages works, but I'm also aware that much of it doesn't. And that's when I go back and readjust. I might move that leg a little, just because I almost prefer it coming over a little bit more than the way that I have it sketched in there. Get this in here. Last thing we want to do is get this one little area so we can start on the star of our painting, which is the figure. It's a wonderful model, Marie, who I used to use at Asilomar during my workshops, and some of you guys that have maybe, if any of you are out there have taken any of those, you might even remember Marie, for herself as an artist. And I just asked her for something kind of timeless, and that's what we ended up with. So we've got enough going on here. Where it pretty much works. I I can see areas that I need to darken, like in here, want a little red on me, but I don't care. I want to go up into the figure now. So I spent about 10 minutes on that background lay-in. Some of which is going to remain, some of it's going to be changed. Looks to me like I can cut on that hat a little bit more, cut in. So, how am I going to start on the figure? That's a great question. I'm going to take one of these brushes right here. I see I need to bring that in more, so I messed up proportion once again. I'd rather paint too far and have to go back and overlap it than I would leave a gaping hole somewhere that I have to kind of go back and cover later. That's time, and it tends to make your painting look overworked. So I'm going to look for the color and the value of that hat, which is quite golden. So I've got yellow. Whoa! I keep forgetting how strong CAD colors are. I don't use them all that often, and my word, I just hit a little bit in there and it went crazy. This is probably too orange, but let me look. A little bit. Okay. It is too orange. This is where you wish you had someone, or line I came up with years ago was paint like your eyes are 10 feet in back of you. That way, that's an impossibility, by the way. I say that simply because it's very hard to judge your painting up close. You're guessing, but you don't know how it all relates until you really get back and get a chance to see it from a distance. And the rule that I kind of work by, as far as, because people say, well, how far back do you want to get? My feeling is you want to get back far enough where your hand will cover the painting. So from here, my hand covers this. But as I step back, my hand eventually, maybe you want to get 8 to 10 feet back there, my hand will cover the painting. And at that point, you're seeing the whole painting as a whole, and you're not looking at just the one part you painted. And that's really what you want to see. You want to see whatever you just did and how it relates to everything else that you've put in there. Like, that feels about right at present. I think I may have to darken it a little bit, but at present, it feels about right. I'm grabbing a rag off camera here in case you're wondering. Okay, now let's go to the light front part of the hat. So what I want to do is I just want to take the color I did and I want to add a little bit of more white to it, maybe a touch more yellow. And we'll test it right here. If you can do it with a big brush, do it with a big brush. Okay? Don't feel compelled to have to take that brush scale, and because you're doing a small thing, don't feel that you necessarily need to take that brush and do something very, very small. So I'm going to paint the top part of the hat, which catches light. Light's coming pretty much, let's understand where the light's coming from, okay? Light is coming from almost straight above, slightly to the side. And the reason I can tell that is that's just looking at the way the light is striking the fabric. I can see it because of that. All right. So now we've got the light striking the top of the hat. We've got this. There's a granted. There is a. Little orange thing. I'm not going to put that in right now. Now the biggest problem with this particular painting, because this is kind of an exercise, like I said, in painting from a photograph that's not necessarily ideal. I just happen to like it, but it's not ideal. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lay the dark in for the hair. That is going to be almost as dark as I can go. Maybe a little bit on the warm side. So I'm going back to my umber, my ultramarine, leaning it a little bit more towards the umber, and we'll literally look to see where the hair is. About here. Here. See, I didn't make the that one part of the hat, I didn't bring it over far enough. This is called finger painting, all right? So we're going to take the hair again. I like kind of the edges I'm getting with this brush. The edge of the hair, it works beautifully. Because it doesn't give me a really knife edge, it gives me kind of a nice soft edge. And you almost cannot distinguish, you can, but you almost cannot distinguish the hair from the background at this particular juncture. All right? So that's primarily where the hair sits. There is going to be a underneath, and there's going to be a bow below. It looks like there's a nice black bow below her neck, which means I still have to paint this area, which I hadn't done. It's my mistake. Okay. So now we got it in with the flesh. For that, I'm going to use a brush that I can control a little bit more. Although before I say that, I see hair right there. So the value of the flesh. This is where I might look back at my study, because I made adjustments in my study. The value of the flesh is very similar, but lighter, to the background, but it's very similar to this. So I'm going to start with almost that kind of a color, and we're going to test it. Keep it slightly on the warm side, not too warm. But I want it a little darker. So what I did is I mixed a little bit more of the umber into it. And we're going to paint there. And we're going to paint the side plane, which gets a little darker. So I just mixed a little bit more umber and my dirty color that I had there into it. Let's take this part of the hat and move it in a little bit more. Now, about the same color and value. In fact, because I'm adding just a hint of a warm color. In this case, it's a little touch of alizarin. You almost are not going to be able to see the difference. What we're going to do is I'm going to paint the front plane. Whoops, it's a little darker than I wanted. Let's try it again. I don't like the tip on this brush right now. I'm going to grab a rosemary. Just a better brush. I don't even know what brand that was, but I was not able to control my paint the way I wanted. So we're hitting the front plane of the cheek, and we're going to push that right into the nose, and then on the other side of the cheek, the other side of the nose, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to paint it right, whoops. Paint it, let's do it again. Needs to feel just a hint darker than that hat. Okay. And does it come down? Yes, it does. Now, under the nose, we're going to just kind of lay this stuff in, and then I'm going to move on to other areas. Because a head, honestly, you can get so hung up in painting a head that you could use your entire hour and a half. But I'm trying to do, I guess for lack of a better word, a little bit more of an impressionistic type of an approach than a rendering or than a portrait. A portrait is very exacting, and this is more of an indication of what I see.
Jamie wanted to know if you could review your color palette one more time.
Yes, I can. My color palette, what I always work with, the only thing I've added to my palette, I've added a couple colors, but I actually have a warm white here. It's a Gamblin warm white, and I like it because I want the whites to be very warm, so I'm going to use my Radiant White. That's Gamblin Radiant White, Gamblin Warm White, then I have a Cad Yellow Hue. My workhorse colors, Yellow Ochre, a little bit of a Cad Red Light, it's just powerful. Lizard Crimson, Ultramarine Blue. Then I have a color that I just happen to have around called Permanent Blue, which basically is a greener blue. I don't know how much I'm going to use of that. Sap Green, crucial, particularly in this painting. Burnt Umber, and then I actually have a little bit of it's some cheap, and by cheap I won't even give you the brand name. It's not the Gamblin, but it's a very inexpensive, what am I calling it? Raw sienna, excuse me. I'm sitting there struggling trying to figure out what the hell the name of that color was. Raw sienna. Painting and talking at the same time can sometimes be a pain. Okay, let's go a little bit further, but not much. I don't want to go too much further on the head right now, because I'll get hung up in it. I know I will. I won't like something, and if I don't like something, then I'm going to want to sit there and fix it and fuss on it. So we're going to kind of leave it. I'm going to pick up a little bit of this dark that I had earlier, and I'm going to rest my hand in the dry spot. Put my hand here. Indicate maybe where an eyebrow is with the corner of that brush. This is a rosemary number, what is this? Number 8. And it's a sable, or a synthetic sable, which is great for figurative work. Okay, so we have a couple of darks there. Let's maybe throw a couple of darks where I'm going to want those eyes. Okay, now we're going to leave it alone. I'm going to lay off that head for a second. We'll go back to it. Once again, if I stay on it for too long, knowing my tendencies and most people's tendencies, so I'm not even speaking for just me, is what you will find you will be doing is dwelling on the head, and pretty soon you'll look at your watch and an hour and a half has passed. So this is where it ties, is a big bow. I kind of like that character of that bow too. It's just kind of cool. And then that dark, it looks like it comes right down in here. I'm going to actually come up with that neck color, and that's the color I'm going to end up using. Actually, no, I'm not. Changed my mind. Okay. One of the difficult colors, because in doing the study I found this out, is coming up with the values and the colors of this outfit that she's wearing. And it's actually quite difficult, believe it or not. I'm just taking turp and I'm actually removing paint right now. Because, you know what, the reason I did that is, and I might as well tell you, is because the garment in shadow is darker than the background behind it. Therefore, I wanted to lighten that background a little bit before I started plowing in on that garment. So now I'm going to grab, I'd like a number 8 if I could. Yeah, so a little tiny filbert number 8. Okay, so now this is a mixing problem, mixing color. So I started with ultramarine blue, I added some white. It's way strong. So now I'm going to add a little, because her outfit has kind of a green characteristic, I'm adding a little bit of my inexpensive junk, so to speak, raw sienna. Don't know why I can't remember that name. I don't lay it out that often, maybe that's why. A little bit more umber into it. A little more green, a little more blue. I want the shadow color. So maybe some ochre to kind of, that feels pretty good. This might be too dark. A little darker than I wanted, but not, it's pretty much in the same color scheme that I'm looking for. So yeah, that's good. The way that I say it, when you're doing a quicker painting, you get about 2 adjustments and then you say, okay, that's good enough. I can live with it. Now, if you're doing a long finish painting, you got that opportunity to go back and fuss and work. So I'm laying in entire shadow masses of this kind of sea green kind of a cloak she's got on. Big, simple areas. With my little filbert here. Another shadow up here. Oh, that actually is a good tone. It works against the hair. That's why that's one of the 2 relationships I want here. The relationship of this to the background and the relationship of the shadow of the garment to the dark of the hair. Those are key. And it's got to fit both. It can't just fit one. All right. Now, where else do I see this shadow? Adding a little bit more of the safflower oil. You know, I didn't finish my palette. Yes, I did.
You-
Yeah, I think I did finish it. Sorry, Jamie.
So you're not concerned about the pattern on the
No,
robe right now?
no. Pattern I put on after I get the form. Get the form first. The pattern will sit on the form. You can't, otherwise, you got to paint the form around the pattern. I mean, it's basic logic if you really think about it.
No sound.
Huh? There we go. A little darker down because it just gets darker. Why does it get darker? There's less skylight that can get to it to illuminate it right in this area. So I just darkened that color with a little more umber in it. Come down in here, hit this, and a few more little darks as it sneaks over in here. I'd rather paint too much so that I have to come over it later. That looks to be the majority of what I want right now. I'm going to go for what I call the in-between color. That is this color, because there's a very light color. So if we can almost break that fabric down into 3 tones. This, we can also punch a little bit extra dark into it. But 3 basic tones, and then a few subtle darker adjustments. So now I'm going to come up with kind of the overall mass color, somewhere this kind of sea green. And I can mix it up right next to the color that I just painted. So white and ochre, start with that. And what I try and do is kind of get the value that I want with that, and then bring a little bit of that green. Let's try the green first, and not, now I'm going to let's try a little bit of blue. Well, close right there. I think I might be a little too green. Boy, I'm pretty darn close. I usually don't come up with the results at best. So if I sound surprised, it's because I am. A little more green. I just didn't have enough of it mixed up, so I mixed up a little bit more. Okay, we're going to start with actually I think I'm going to make it a little bluer. A little bit of that permanent blue that I have. When I do, that's going to darken it, so I have to go back and add white to that color. Still feels a little dark to me. Let's try it one more time. That's what I'm living with. There and there and up in here. We're going to put a really nice light spot up in there, so I'll kind of leave it alone a little bit. There is a pattern on here. I can leave it or I can paint over it. And it's going to be about the same value, maybe a little bit lighter than the tone that I have down on the board. So we're going to finish that on down. We're going to get the way it comes from here out. Different types of clothing can take different types of time. This is relatively involved, just so you know. There's a pattern. It's very loose clothing. When clothing is this loose, it tends to have a lot of tonal variation. It's light up in there, but it gets dark. So I'm going to mix a little bit more of the permanent blue that I have off to the side, because I want to go just a touch darker right here. So I don't know if you guys can see it, but it's a little bit darker than the colors I was laying in a little bit ago. And it's going to come all the way up. Where does it go? About here. And here. And then we're going to go on the other side, and it goes lighter. It goes a little bit lighter. So I actually took some of that warm white, and we're going to, let's see how that looks. A little bit lighter. More warm white. So we're going to take it, and we're going to put it right here, that cuff. This is actually a pretty difficult photo to paint from, because everything isn't clear, and you actually have to sit and figure a few things out. I like to know what I'm painting. There are artists that say, paint what you see, not what you know, which is very famous. And I say, paint what you see based upon what you know. So if you see something, I like to try and figure out what it is I'm seeing, and not necessarily just assume that everything is just fine. I just noticed I didn't paint that shadow down far enough. Also, I don't know what I was thinking, but that needs to come down to where and cover that knee. Okay. Just little problems that you encounter along the way, which always makes painting challenging. Also makes it kind of fun. It's fun to challenge yourself, but I don't recommend challenging yourself until you begin to gain some confidence in what you're painting and how to paint. And I think until you gain the confidence, you should stay with relatively simple subjects. There's nothing wrong with pushing yourself to see if you can do something, but there's also that inherent problem that I hear a lot about, and that's called frustration. And that will occur very often when you tackle something you're not ready for and you want it to come out better. The more you become a little bit more adept at painting, the more you'll begin to understand that it always doesn't work perfect. So now I'm going to paint, one thing I didn't do, I want to bring this shadow, there's a pattern, and that's why I didn't catch it. That shadow all the way down on this lapel. Okay. Feels better. Feel like I can live with that. I can take this color and kind of push it in. All right. I don't want to dwell on that. I'm going to go to the shadows on the white. The shadows on the white. They tend to be warm. So I'm going to start with some white. Maybe throw a little bit of my junk.
Sienna.
Raw sienna. See, you can tell I don't lay it out in my palette too often. Keep searching for the word. So we're going to come right here. Oh, that's pretty close. Geez, that's pretty close. I like that. And we're going to come, and there's a lot of variation in whites, particularly in the shadows of whites. There's just a tremendous amount of variation. And the reason being is white can reflect colors better than any other material because it doesn't have an inherent base color. And because it doesn't, you see more variation than you would in other colors. So being pretty bold about this. There, cast shadow here. There's a couple of shadows up in here I want to hit. Under the hand, and it comes down there. Big shadow here. These are folds. Now, this overlaps, and I'm going to take a little bit of brown and a little bit of blue and mix it. Whoop! Grab the wrong blue. Into it go just a hair darker, and this shadow right here. And that's probably a little darker than I wanted, but shadow on this leg, and I'm going to bring the leg out. I don't like the way that I sketched it out. Comes out, there's a little cuff there, and there is right, I can almost take that, and right here, there are shadows on the legging part of this. So we lay all these in as quickly as possible, down to the ankle, back in here, we just kind of smear that around. And there's going to be another little area that sneaks its way down. A little darker there. And as it goes into the recesses underneath, I will darken it a little bit. And there's a dark right there between their pantaloons, or her leggings. I guess I don't even know what this is called. There's a lot of layering, let's put it that way in this. So we're going to put that dark right there, and I used some umber. I went a little too bold with the umber, and so I just threw some more blue back into it. You can augment any color once you lay it down. You do not have to live with that exact color that you laid down. I think that's important to know. Just because you put it down there, it goes back to the first thing that I talked about guessing. Everything you do is kind of an educated guess, and as you progress, you correct and adjust those guesses. All right, now there's an underside. There's a flap here, and that is an underside. It's similar in color, but it's a little cooler. And it's a little too dark. So I just threw some more white into it. That feels a little bit better. Bakers can't be choosers in terms of ending up with the exact color, so, but that's this color. And there's some pattern on it, which is going to be kind of interesting. It lightens up just a little bit right up in here. So it's lighter than the shadow. Not enough. Let's do it again. Okay, so now it sits down underneath, and there's light hitting on the top of that. We haven't even delved into that. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the shadow on her shirt that she's wearing underneath. And I almost need a flesh tone in there to make it work. So I think what I might do is go back into the face. Let's see if I've got a small bristle. Here we go.
I have one.
I'm going to go back into that face a little bit. It's going to take a little bit of testing here. Too dark? Well, let's check this out. Throw some blue into that. It's a little bit of blue, orange, ochre. I think I'm a little too light, and I might heat it up just a little bit. Maybe a little bit more umber into it. So it's a little too green. Yeah, a little bit more. I threw just a little bit of alizarin into that color. Yeah, let's live with that right now. So we're going to go there. I'm actually looking down at my study because I made a lot of adjustments when I did that little. Okay, so now we're going to go into on the face with that same color and cross my fingers that it's the right. Should be lighter. It's a little too much lighter, and it should be warmer. So let's try it. And I want it warmer still. I don't like that brush. I gotta get a brush
Here,
that works better for me. Ah, no, that one. Okay.
any of these?
Not getting the warmth that I want. I keep adding, there we go. A little more cat red light into it. A little bit of the temple region right there. I'm going to go back to this background, believe it or not. I want to chop that in a little bit. There we go. The drawing, I didn't like the drawing. The drawing of the contour of the face feels better there. And it's catching a little bit of reflected light, so it's going to be a little bit of warmth, and maybe even a little cool back there. Right down here. All right? Now, what's happening, and I want to explain this as best I can so that you guys understand it. Whenever you get a hat on somebody, what happens is it blocks the light from the planes that are facing upward, so that what happens is the reflected light from everything that's down below actually, just want to change that. actually illuminates the underplanes. That's why, for example, I can paint the underside of the nose here, the underplane. I can paint, threw some more camera light into it and I went too strong. But let's go ahead and do it anyway. The bridge of the nose, because it's facing downward, so it's catching reflected light. And you can pursue and push that as far as you feel you can get away with. Let's state it that way. So we get that. We get a little bit in here and a little bit in here under the nose. Then we get generally under the lower lip, which is right about here, so that the chin that faces upward is actually in shadow. All right, so we're looking as closely as I can at this photograph. This is where you have to really begin to look into things because they're unclear. As I was stating, it's one of the perils of working from this photograph, and I'm just fortunate that I have painted enough models from life and enough figures over the course of all my years where I kind of know what to look for, and if I don't see it, I kind of invent it. So now we're going to try and put the lips in. Alizarin crimson, little umber, back into that kind of shadowy color, and this is my first guess at it. It's not dark enough. And that's I put one little, you probably can't even see that. I put one little dot down and I could tell it wasn't dark enough. So now I'm going to do it again. I threw more umber into it. That feels a little better. And really what's happening is you're painting the lips together.
Sorry.
And the upper lip, truthfully, catches a little bit of light. So, now I also destroyed some things, messed some things up while I was doing that. The shadow under the nose, which is dark. And I'm going to rest my fingernail down so I don't pick up paint. And we're going to leave it. I don't like that little light I threw in there at all. And I don't like the eyes at all. I'm going to go back to the dark. They're too identified. They need to be more mysterious and shadow back. So really what I end up seeing is more of a plane of where that eye is and not the exactness of that eye. And that feels a lot better. The mouth is almost there. It's still not quite right. I don't want to dwell on it. Like I said, you can get so hung up in this that I could spend pretty much the whole time just fussing and getting the mouth as correct as I can. I do want to warm the shadow of the cheek up right in here. So that's actually setting up pretty well. I don't want to go much further. Let's get the rest of the painting going, and then with the allotted time that I have left, I'll go back into that face. So now we're going to start with some, I can actually, now that, excuse me, I have the shadow of that neck in there. It goes a little darker down its base. But now that I have it in there, I can actually come up. I want to get a little darker down there. There we go. But I can come up with a shadow color, which it looks like I was pretty close to actually. So we're going to kind of mix kind of a bluish color. Yeah, let's just live with that. What do you say? Don't like the corner of the mouth. That's my problem. It's not your problem. I might as well tell you what I do and don't like. Well, I won't. if I don't like certain things in a painting, I'm not going to lie to you and say, oh, it looks wonderful. I'll tell you, that area just doesn't get it right now. Let's see if we can make it work. I know if I adjust long enough, on most areas, I can get them working. The challenge is, can I get it close enough in the allotted amount of time that I'm giving myself? I think I can. I'm getting close. The eyes are a little bit starry-eyed right now. They're a little dark. There's a lot of ways of doing that. I'm going to deal with that a little bit. I won't deal with it right now. Let's keep on moving. Shadow, I see the shadow get warmer down here. And I've got all these colors that are very close in value and in color, and so I'm just utilizing colors I already have mixed up. So, to me it's starting to work. The colors are starting to work. I do want to get the hand in, and I'm going to paint the shadow of that hand first. And all I'm going to be able to do on the hand is do an indication. It's not going to be a fully rendered hand, just because hands can take forever. I'm trying to get the shadow of that hand in, and it keeps coming out too dark and too blue. So I'm adding a lot more light to it. Let's try it one more time. This is the last time I'm giving it. Okay, that's better. I can live with that. Division between the fingers. Division between the fingers. I'm not sure how much of that I'm going to get in there. The division between the fingers. And there's a hand peeking out right here. Looks like it peeks out right about there, and that would be the shadow on the wrist. So, mix up the light, and this is flesh in sunlight. So it's a different kind of flesh that we're mixing up there. It's much lighter. That's pretty close. So we pick up the shadow and get a little bit of it moving into the form. A little bit of it moving into the form. So we got, there's your wrist. And the front of the hand actually gets a little, needs to get a little bit lighter. So the wrist is right here, and the front plane of that hand looks to be about here. I haven't stood back, so I can't tell. I may be a little off in this. Down near the knuckles, it's always going to get a little warmer. And I can see it, and that's a little too warm, but it's not bad. And the fingers themselves are right about in that realm right there. And then, that actually looks relatively correct. The wrist, and the other hand, as it comes out, needs a little bit more ochre in that red color. There we go. Right there. And we'll do that. Okay. We're almost ready to start adding the lights on this thing. So I'm not even say almost ready. We're ready. For me, in order for me to finish this thing up in about the next 25 minutes, that's what it's going to take. So, adding some medium, a lot of white, maybe some warm white and white together. A lot of this medium to keep it thick. And let's start testing. I'm going to add a little bit more warm white to that. The first thing I'm going to test with is right here. And then we're going to come down. See, I want to give myself a little time to go back into this background a little bit. So, I'm going to throw a little ochre into that to warm it up. Just a little bit. There we go. And let's pull that over there. So if I lift up as I paint into wet paint, I lift up a lot. I just barely, I almost mix the two together, but there. What happens, you have to start training your eye into looking at specific areas. And that's what I'm doing. I'm looking right at the area I'm trying to paint. And I just messed up a little bit, so I really hope I have this shadow kind of correct so I can actually come back and literally indicate the shadow. You want to do it as simple. The harder you have to work on something, the more overworked it will look. The simpler you can do something with less effort, the more it will feel more natural. It will not feel as burdensome. There's a fold in there I just saw. All right, so light here, light here, here, kind of comes up, then we get it. Okay, let's get the, overlap that hand, and then it goes behind the hand. So that hand is just kind of hidden there. And it divides this hand from that hand. But we also have light popping back through and catching down underneath the hand, which helps define, there's a little shadow in there which I didn't get. We're going to move on to, take that same white, let's move up back onto the shirt, the blouse. Well, you can tell where I was raised. And we'll come down, panel right, barely leave an edge there. Down, overlap, overlap. Disappears, and it catches down in here, it catches right here. I'm going to get the top of that piece of fabric that I painted the underside of.
Ray wants to know if you have tips for what you can do if you've overworked an area of a painting.
Overworked an area of the painting. Yeah, wipe it out. Seriously. Smudge it all together. Smudge it all together, throw everything out of focus, and then slowly bring it back as it begins to feel comfortable. And if it doesn't do it a second time. And you just do that until it feels right. It's probably the most common thing to do is to overwork, and just, people are afraid. I'll tell you that the biggest thing, most artists, and I was one of these, so I'm speaking from experience, are afraid to lose anything that they've invested in already. In other words, if you've already put time into things, you're saying, well, I'm not going to lose that. You've got to. You have to. You've got to go back, lose it, and then go back and find it again. That's truthfully the best advice I could give there, is do not be afraid to wipe things out and go back and put them in again. Alright, this leg down here is catching a little bit of light, a little cooler reflected light. I see it, and it's right there. And it helps define that leg, but we don't want it in light. So what happens is this garment overlaps this garment. So I'm going to go a little bit more, get the rest of that garment in, and then go back, move back a little bit of the face, and then we'll go literally into the background. Then if I have time, I'm going to change the shape of this light. I don't like where I had it. So we're going to bring this out a little bit. And I had it here, and I'm going to bring it out here. Best stroke of the whole painting was right there, you guys. Every now and then you get one of those and you go, oh, you live for those.
Betsy, excuse me, Betsy was noticing that most of your brushes are flats.
Yes, they are.
Is there a reason for that?
I like them. There's no real reason. I'm working with a filbert right now. But generally, I just tend to like flats because they lay the color down, and I can show you real quick. There's a big flat, so I can do it with it. If you look at this, so I can apply pressure to this side, get a harder edge and stroke, and on this side get a softer edge. Or I can do a very firm architectural stroke where I just press and get the whole thing. So I just feel I have a little more control generally. Of course, as I say that, I just went back and picked up my filbert. But I'm painting fabric, and it's a little bit different when I'm doing fabric. So I don't want to, we're going to go real quick now. There, I hit that. I already messed up down below, so let's change this. Okay. I didn't get the shadow on the foot. And it's about here. It's very similar to the background color, and it is when I look at it here also. So I'm just going to use that color right there. I've got this color in my brush too. You guys can go back anytime. If you start to see something, you say, boy, I missed that. I didn't miss it, I just overpainted it. But put a fold in if you need to. You know, pull something here and there if you need to. In here, I could see more gradations, more variations. So there's a lot of that you can always go back and do. I'm going to go with a flesh color on that foot, which is about there. And foot comes out. Let's get it about there. What do you say? And then let's get the shadow.
So Ray appreciated your answer about overworked areas and said, on another note, are you available on a contract basis to come in and fix overworked paintings? I'm asking for a friend.
I'll tell you what.
Oh, you're so funny.
And if you'll do the same for me. I overwork them just like anybody else. Ray, just so you know, this goes for anybody. Sometimes you don't know that you overworked it till a couple months later, and you look at something, you go, oh my God, what was I thinking? I do that too often. You know, you begin to say, you know, do I really know what the heck I'm doing? Because you start to see things that you do, and you go, oh Jesus, why did I do that? It's the red tip on that shoe. And we're going to clean that area. Oh, boy, did I mess that up. See what you mean? I didn't want to do that much. That's actually, I don't want to do any more to that. I don't want to call any more attention to that. The foot is the opposite end of the head. I know my anatomy. Okay, because it's the opposite end of the head, you want more of the interest to happen more towards the top, up here, not down here. So, and we're going to obscure some of that stuff. So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go into the background a little bit, and then I'm going to go back into the head. Let's see, oh, I know what. I left some things out. Sorry, you guys. It's too much to worry about here. So I'm going to add a little pattern into this. And we'll start up in here. There we go. I like that color better than I see on okay. Missed my calling. I should have been a fashion designer here. And you get to be one. You guys, a lot of people know the work of Gustav Klimt. It just made me think of it. So I'll impart some of my knowledge of artists that I happen to really admire. Gustav Klimt is one of them. He, I always tell people, he was kind of a control freak in the fact that he was very famous for doing paintings of women, and he would literally design their hairstyle, design what they wore, their earrings, and then he'd get his painting done, and then he designed the frame. So a Gustav Klimt painting literally was a painting that was 100% controlled by Gustav Klimt. I don't have the knowledge, the interest, or the energy to do that stuff. It's enough just to get a painting done. I want to paint some of those in the shadow, and they're a little darker and duller, but they still are red. I mean, they still have that pink characteristic.
Fernando wants to know, how do you know something's overworked?
You don't very often initially. If you know it, I do sometimes. Sometimes I don't really know it until a week or two later. So whether you know something is overworked or not really has to do with your own assessment of your own work. And I'm going to tell you right now, if you're a young or a beginning artist, and I say that way because some beginning artists, they don't begin until they're older. But usually when you're a beginning, what happens is your eyes artistically and technically haven't developed to the point where you can actually tell whether you're making a mistake or not. One of the biggest telltale signs is in a still life and doing ellipses. A lot of people and pretty accomplished artists still have problems with ellipses to make them feel correct. So I'm looking into the shadows now, I'm seeing some darks. So the best way to tell if it's overworked is put it away for a while and then go back and look at it. And chances are, if you spend too long in one area, it's overworked.
You start to get too picky.
Yep. You saw me saying, well, I had to get away from the head. Well, a lot of people that are figurative painters are what I call headhunters. And what I mean by that is they look to the head, and the whole painting revolves around that head. And so they will work and work and work, and 9 out of 10 times, honestly, it becomes way overworked. So you're better to leave it alone, move on to another area, then revisit, as I like to say. Revisit an area and see if it bothers you as much as it did. Sometimes it doesn't. So, I mean, one other comment about overwork. Sometimes you think something's overworked and it's really not. You just haven't let it sit long enough. You need to let something sit and see how you feel about it to see if it's truly overworked from your point of view, because you're just not going to know. I've looked at paintings literally a year later and I realized areas are overworked. Sometimes I also realize there's drawing problems that I didn't catch. Time is a great remedy for that, literally. Getting away. I'll tell you what I do is I have about 3 to 4 paintings going at once. And most people that have taken classes with me have heard me say this. And that's very simply because I am good on a painting in terms of being able to keep my focus, my interest, and not overwork. I'm good for about, I've learned over the years, for about 4 hours. And after 4 hours, I gotta get away from it. So what I'll do, so if I'm in my studio, is I'll pick up another painting that I'm working on. So I'm adding light to the garment now. I'm adding some of that light that I was talking about earlier. Other thing we're going to do is within those patterns, are some areas that are lighter, like that. And this is just pure paint. This is just, right now, you can even see. See, look at that little gob of paint. Love it when I get little goobers like that you can kind of lay down and leave.
So you're not trying to be too exact to that floral pattern. You're
Absolutely not. I'm putting them where I see them, but I'm not trying to be accurate. The only thing I'm trying to be accurate with is color and value. That's important. I gotta define that shoulder a little bit more. Okay. I'm gonna leave that alone for a little bit, and I'm gonna start to bring some stuff over it. Also, I have a little tool here I was going to show you guys. It's a little rubber brush. So I can actually take this rubber brush.
Whoa. So wait, you're picking up paint.
That's
or
all I'm
you're
doing. I'm removing paint. It's allowed. If it works, do it. Explore a little bit. See what comes up for you. If I don't like some of this, see, I'll put it in. The thing that's nice, I can put as much of this in as I want. And I can also take a brush and knock it back down, lose it. All I'm doing is take it, look at that, just push it right. So it's in there. It's one of those things that people go, how'd you do that? And some artists don't like to tell their secrets. There are no secrets. As one of our teachers says, their student was complaining one time because they wanted to find out what the magic was, and felt like the teacher wasn't giving them all the answers. And so, the teacher and myself were talking, and he came up with a line that I love. He says, "The magic is there's no magic. It's work. It's just plain old hard work." So we're going to knock those down because they stand out a little too much, but they're there.
Chuck Pyle said scratchboard.
Scratchboard. That's it. You're showing your age, dude. Now, and we can do it that way, and we can also take a line. We can take a palette knife.
Go a little bit over here. It's 109.
Okay. So I got about a little over 10 minutes left. If I go with the 120 like I usually do.
And what kind of surface are you working on again?
This is a piece of hardboard.
Gessoed, right?
Gessoed hardboard. I work on it a lot. Those of you guys that happen to see me do the painting of the animals a few weeks ago, that was on gessoed hardboard also. And I'm going to take a brush. I'll use any tool, honest to God, an egg beater, if it worked, I'd use it. But I'll use any tool I can get my hands on. And I experiment a lot. I find new tools. I'm in a store. Got this, where is it? It's one rubber brush I was going to show you guys. I thought I put it in here. Oh, here it is. Look at this thing. It's rubber. So if I want, I'm just going to show you. I'm going to wreck something, but I don't really care. Look at that. Look at the paint I picked up. So I can bring paint back down over it. You know, it's chaotic, which generally it is, or I can take the edge of it, or I can do a knife. I know a couple of artists that use acrylics, and they use these things with acrylics. Incredible. Some of the qualities they get, honest to God. And that's kind of where I learned this stuff. That, sometimes, other things that I haven't shown you. I'm trying to show you all the tricks that I know. Take a cloth. This is the fun part. Some of that stands out too much. Now, so that I'm on time, there's some of this that overlaps the figure, if you notice. So I'm going to take that little brush and see if it'll work. I don't know. Sometimes it works and sometimes I haven't had any luck with it. But what I do is I want to get some of this overlapping. So I'm going to take the brush, set it down, and just make a stroke. You can't slow down and do it slow because it's not going to work. You've got to do these things relatively quick. Let me grab, I have a liner. Here we go. This is my trusty Savior that I hate to use too much because it's calligraphic tool more than it is anything. Meaning, so we're going to take the liner and we're going to kind of bring it that way. A lot of turp because I'm painting on top of wet paint. So, and you see these flicks that you make them very quickly with your hand. You don't sit. If you try and make it slow, it's going to look labored. So I'm going to try and see if I can bring one up there. You got to make that noise in order to make it really work too. Go up and over. And up. A little bit back in here. We can go back into negatives in here. I'm going to pick up a prettier color, a little yellow, a little green. A lot of medium. And I want to do a couple of these up in here.
Yes, Mina, a liner is a really thin,
What?
tiny. Mina was asking if a liner is a very thin brush.
Liner is a watercolor
Really?
brush. It's very thin but very long bristle. This is synthetic. This is a real inexpensive one, you guys. I think I paid about $3 for this thing. But truthfully, these gesso brushes run about $6. You can't get those. You can get them. You can get a at Home Depot. You can get just a house painting brush, which they're even a little sloppier, and sometimes it actually works better. Well, I like some of these that overlap the hand a little bit. It's kind of like if you do a bad hand, overlap stuff over it. You know, it's like if you can't paint feet, put them in the water, put them in the weeds. I don't want to go too far with this, but I want to get enough in here where it feels convincing. Over a foot. This I could do for a long time, so I won't spend a lot of time, but I wanted to show you the effect. I may do a little bit of that afterwards. A couple of other things I want to do. I want to go back into the head, but before that I want to add this tone in here, which is kind of light, and I've got I want to get some. This time I've added for my medium. I added a lot of the saffron oil, and what I want to do. This is kind of the sand underneath this, and the reason I want to get this in here is because I do want to overlap some stuff over it. So we're going to go in there, there, a little more ochre in it, maybe. Go down near the foot, clean up the foot. A little bit more ochre into it, and so I should have probably put some of this in before I put those strokes over it, just so I get a little bit of a, I'm going to put another bank of sand coming in right there. I did it in my study and I liked it. So we'll do something like that. Now, that's an underpainting for what you're going to do over it, because you're going to go back either with your liner or with your brush, the rubber brush. Oops. And you're going to do some things over, because you don't want see, sometimes you pick this color up and it actually works well right into the surrounding color.
What color did you pick up?
You pick up, in other words, I started with kind of an olive, but as I paint into the browns and greens, I kind of pick up some of that color and I bring it back through. It works because foliage isn't a color. This kind of stuff isn't a color. Let's do a couple of things we can do here. I'm going to get the sky in.
Just gonna ask you about that.
And we're going to paint the sky almost that value, a little bit of a gray blue. So I got a lot of my white, a little of the ultramarine, because I don't want a bright blue. And ultramarine is bright, by the way. It's just it's cold bright, but I'm going to kill it with a little cat red light. So it's not bright. That will gray it back down. I might even put a little ochre. Oh, I like that. Yep. Let's do it. So everything is very chaotic. So let's keep the sky simple. Now we get it down to a certain point. Try not to get it into that. And then I can, with either this brush, there's a lot of different brushes you can use. Right? But truthfully, my old standby that I use all the time, come on, the gesso brush probably works the best for this kind of a thing. So you paint, like I said, you're painting in here, got a little bit too much blue in it. Okay, so now we're just going to kind of bring it across, bring it down. And I'll paint both ways. I'll paint some of it down, then I'll paint some of the foliage growth back on top. But you don't want to call too much attention to a perfect edge there. That feels actually pretty good. I don't like the bump right above her head. There, so we'll kind of cut that back down. So that's basically how we handle it. Last thing I want to do is I want to go back into her head for just some touch-up stuff, and that's all I'm probably going to have time to do today. I try and hold this to an hour and 20 max. I don't think I've ever hit an hour on this yet. And this, by the way, in case you guys are interested, it's the painting is a 24 by 24. A lot of times people ask, well, how big was that? Come on, where's my? Let's use this rosemary here. I wasn't going to, but I'm going to. I'm going to use the paint that's there, clean it up. Oh, one last thing I didn't do. Don't want to do it with this. I'm going to do it with this brush because I happen to have it.
Oh, the ribbon.
Yeah. And that edge has a little bit of a light on it too. It's my fingernail dragon right there, just so you guys. Okay?
Whoops.
Okay, just a little bit into that face. The eyes bother me. They're too starry-eyed. I think I mentioned that earlier. And I think I need to soften.
Hey, John Wentz in Paris. How are you? Oh, cool.
Hey, John.
Hi, everybody. Sorry I didn't address everyone who signed in, but thanks for watching and hanging out with us.
Fix the mouth. Mouth bothers me still. Bothered me when I first did it. Still bothers me. Probably bother me tomorrow, too. Hit that cheek one more time. And a little bit of a shadow there. Where are we at? Okay, I should be wrapping it up. Oh! Oh! And I could call it a mole.
Oh, God.
Just softening it into the rest of the paint. It's a little harsh. Geez, what time is it? Oh, it's not that late, is it?
It is 1:20.
Oh, then I hit it just about where I wanted to. I talked a little too much right in the beginning, so. it's pretty much where I want it, you guys. I mean, I will probably go back and put another 20 minutes into it to fix some things that bother me, maybe darken a little bit as it goes, as the shadow here goes under the hat. It goes a little darker. There's a lot of subtleties like that that you can add into it. That kind of stuff I will do. This is a relatively, I always use that word. I know I overuse it because I never figure everything is all that perfect, but it's a relatively accurate lay-in and gives you a rough idea of how to deal with a figure environment. I know I am going to do another figure environment. I don't know if I'm going to do it next week or after, but I'm going to do one that involves more trees and rocks. I already have one picked. The other thing I plan to do is, and I think I might do this next week, I don't know. I might do something where I work from a black and white, a figure, just a figure from a black and white photo, and that's not really well defined, and talk a little bit about structure and invention and things of that nature. So I might do that week. I really haven't decided. I literally decided what I was going to be doing today about 15 minutes before we went on.
It's more like 40 minutes.
A couple of images, and this was the image that I kind of decided because I did that little study last night. So, in any event, it works pretty well. There's things that I say right now to make this pattern come out into a light. Just add a little bit more pattern on the lapel. Anyway, you guys, let me, so that I'll finish while I'm painting here. I'll talk while I'm painting, but I just wanted to thank everybody. I'm always impressed with the number of people that actually are interested in wanting to see demonstrations. Since I've taught for so darn long, I've done demonstrations really for over 35, over 40 years now, and so I'm kind of used to it. And because I've taught a lot of different, I don't want to say styles, but mediums, not medium subjects. I always ask if anybody's interested in anything in particular. As long as I think I can do it, I will give it a shot. So if any of you have any suggestions, whether you suggest now or on Facebook or something, that would be great. Still don't like the mouth. Other than that, painting's okay. And with that, whoops, a little bit of light there, huh? Too much. I don't. The light on the side of the face here, I went a little too crazy with and got it a little too light for my taste. So gotta bring that shadow down. Anyway, hope this worked well. We tried new mic, and hopefully the sound came out better than in the past. We're learning as we go. Anna is much more of a technological wizard than I am.
Huh.
I mean, I'm lucky I can draw and paint halfway decent because my computer skills are like. So, hope you enjoyed it. Gives you a rough idea as to how to do it. You saw some new tools and tricks. I'll probably do a little bit more work to it and post it, but I won't do more than 20 more minutes into it. Don't have that much enthusiasm. Okay? Go get lunch and keep painting. Bye-bye.
Stay safe, everyone, and healthy. And we'll see you next time. I'll go in a little closer. Lots of thick paint. Happy Passover, happy Easter,
Happy painting.
and happy painting. Bye, everybody.